last one, the person, she was also getting further and further away from the table.
Yeah, I pulled this forward already for myself.
Yeah, watch, and then you're going to talk and be like,
Probably.
he's so into this.
Are you staying for the
A crawl?
pub crawl?
I don't know. Yeah, probably not. I'm too old.
I think I know what the answer is.
Yeah. I'm done. Hot mic.
Sorry, I'm not saying for your thing, but you're good.
How did summer go? Did you guys have a good summer?
So good. So much time in Vermont, so I go to Vermont a lot. It's just amazing up there. If I could just remove myself from Boston and work up there, I would. But
Whereabouts in the month?
Burke Mountain, so like probably like an hour from J Peak.
Okay.
So it's nice, like so remote, so low pace. Can you hear me on the mic? Can you hear me? You can hear me.
I was in J Peak last weekend.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
It's so nice up there.
It's great.
Yeah, because I can't see you because you're behind the podium, and then I can barely see you.
I know.
That's what it is. The one downstairs, I don't know if you've been to the other room, the bigger one, it's just one big table.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah.
and then there's like a little podium that the moderator has stood at, which is a nice setup. But
You
anyway,
said I could sit there, but it would be awkward.
I feel like after hugging, I want to like give
You kind
smack
of
on the
just,
butt here.
yeah.
Yeah,
You gotta
please do.
rate.
Please do.
You gotta.
Alright, we get your attention now?
Thank you. Mine or here? I think.
Check.
I feel like you're just doing this on purpose.
I didn't mean to do that. It's a hot mic. Actually, it is. I mean, I'm back here right
Yeah,
now.
I know.
Okay.
I blame Chris.
I'll talk very quietly.
All right. Looks like we're right on time here, so let's get started because I want to make sure we also get to finish on time. So, everyone, thank you for joining us here at the 9th Annual Startup Boston Week. Our mission for this conference is to bring together the entire startup community, no matter what your industry is, your department, your funding stage, your development stage. And Startup Boston exists to connect, educate, and celebrate this ecosystem while serving as a trusted and unbiased guide to the best resources that can help you start and scale your startup. I'm Jeremy Brown. I'm an investor and advisor in the community, and I'm the room host for the day. Before we dive in, I just want to say a huge thank you to Suffolk University for sharing the space with us. They've been a great partner for the last few years. If you haven't already, please check out their table out in the hall there. They do a lot to support the Boston startup community, and they have some great entrepreneurial programs that you might be able to take advantage of or even be a mentor for. So with that, I will get out of the way so you can listen to the people that you want to hear, and it's all yours.
I'll take it off. Testing. Okay. So I'm really excited to kick off this session today. I'm going to introduce my panel in a second, but I really want to just talk about what we're going to be diving into today. So we're going to talk about all the stages for, let me just adjust this, all the stages for winning your first enterprise deal. So that might mean you're a founder looking to win your deal. You might be an early startup or mid-cycle, but we're going to talk about all those stages. So before we do that, I want to introduce myself. I'll be leading today's conversation. My name is Haley. I am an account executive, and I have been running enterprise deals for longer than I can remember at this point. But is my mic? Okay, all right, just checking here. So before we kick it off, I feel like, move back? Okay, sorry, he's giving me the mic a mic issue. So before we kick things off, I want to introduce our panel. So I'm going to ask each one to give a little bit about their background, understand their point of view, so that when we're going through today's conversation, you'll have a better idea of where they're at, what they're doing, and how it makes sense within this conversation. So I'll kick it off with you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So my name's Hugh Newton-Hill. I currently lead Attenzi's team in North America. We're around 35 million ARR, game-based simulation training. We can unpack that a bit more, but essentially we create training environments where people can train on real-life tasks and skills in a virtual safe environment. We work across industries, from large coffee companies who we can't mention, but they happen to be green and pretty ubiquitous across the world, to McKinsey, BCG, BP, Equinor, Circle K, lots of different enterprise customers. My personal background is I started my career at BCG, so you can blame the suit and the shirt on that. This is a casual Friday for me. But really, like, learned a lot there about real problem solving, really understanding what drives businesses, but also understanding how C-suite make decisions and how C-suite need to be communicated to and convinced. And I think that led me to be able to land many of the enterprise logos that we have. I would say my transition to the startup world was very opportunistic. I was doing my MBA at London Business School, and an ex-BCG colleague who'd really founded Attenzi came and said, "Why don't you come join in a part-time role as an intern?" And at that time, I was at Goldman doing investment banking, so like very different world and very risk averse. But I absolutely loved it and got sucked in. And during that time, we were able to land BCG actually as a client. So that was really an unlock logo for us. So that's a bit of my perspective and background, and happy to share more as we go through.
Bethany, would love to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Bethany Fiocchi-Root. I own Ocean View Marketing. I have over 17 years of digital marketing and performance marketing experience. I started my career in startups and then sort of slowly moved through different size companies until I landed at GoDaddy. And so I've spent the last 17 years growing multi-million-dollar marketing programs, and I've now brought that into Ocean View Marketing. I love working with startups. I love that beginning phase. I love the numbers. So that's my perspective from here. I have both experience in B2B as well as B2C, and I'm super excited for this conversation.
Wow, same. You were at GoDaddy for that long?
Not that long. That was the last part of my career.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
GoDaddy was a client. That's why I was wondering. All right, mic check. You guys okay? Cool. So I'm Ben. Nice to meet everybody. I'm up here because I was a founder and a CEO for 23 years and sold 2 companies, was a Y Combinator alum, and invested in 36 companies. My companies that I ended up selling were all B2B companies. They were all B2B to C, if you will. Sold the first of those 2 to Universal Music Group, and then the second one to one of our friendly competitors at YC, and have spent my entire career initially coming out of the music and entertainment industry into the call it the digital asset management industry back in 2008, before we even called it DAM Industries. And then the last one was a professional photography platform. We did over 100,000 shoots a year across the country. All of our clients included all the Fortune 100s, and we did an entire end-to-end managed system and everything else. I always did founder-led sales for a very long time, and so that's an area that I can talk to very closely. The pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly. Then I was a founder and resident for a little bit in the regulation crowdfunding space with WeFunder. That was awesome. I was also a ninja on this small consultancy team during the beginning part of the pandemic, figuring out both like how to digitize the food supply chain, because we were basically throwing away all our food, and then how to create last mile fulfillment and essentially capacity as a service issues with the largest parking operator in the country. As much as I love consulting, it's kind of soul-sucking work for a guy like me, but nice to have made an impact. And so now I'm the director of startup banking at Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. I was a client there for a little over 14 years, and never thought I would end up in a bank. I am definitely an accidental banker. But more so what I do there is I work very closely with the startup founders on a very tactical basis, because startup banking covers everything from the EIN formation all the way through essentially a successful Series A raise. So it's much more tactical. It's all about everything from storytelling, your go-to-market, commercialization, raising capital, increasing headcount and everything else. Once you get a little later stage, then it turns into more of the, financial side of things, which we crush at, but that's clearly what I'm not good at. And that's where I'm at today. So today I get to put my founder hat back on and talk about enterprise sales, which is a lot of fun. I'm done.
Okay, just,
I mean, I can keep going.
just wanted to check. I just
I'm
wanted
good,
to
I'm
make
good.
sure pausing is always appropriate. So before we step into the questions, and I want to leave enough time because I want to be able to ask you, for you to ask questions as well, but I wanted to get a view on why the first enterprise deal is important. And I wanted to get each one of your views on how you feel about it and how you look at it from each perspective. So we can kick it off, and maybe Bethany, you can start first.
Sure. So getting your first logo from a marketing perspective really adds a whole layer of trust, and it gives you some clout when you go forward and try to make other sales and get other accounts. It's going to give you some proof of concept. It's going to give you some data to be able to talk about in your marketing, and it's really critical for you to be able to have that data-backed trust behind you.
Hugh, your thoughts on your perspective?
I mean, that's huge. I think the thing you need to remember about enterprise logos is oftentimes you aren't allowed to speak about them. So I think that's a key consideration. And I kind of spurred this question because I think it's an important one when you're thinking about whether you are going to be pursuing enterprise logos, is really asking yourself, what are you trying to drive with this? Like, by far your biggest accounts will be enterprise logos down the line, but is that, are you going to land the biggest revenue on your first enterprise logo? Probably not. I would say for us, consistently, our first enterprise logo in each segment has taught us so much. So that, I would say, is the biggest benefit, is the learning around how our product actually fits within the ecosystem, what value it actually delivers, and where those gaps are for us to build something that really makes an impact. So I'd say that learning around the product market fit and really value creation for the clients, that you have a very compelling story to tell there, is, I would say, the biggest benefit that we've experienced. Ben.
I agree with everything here, and I don't want to repeat it, so I'm going to go at a different angle, which is that once you do land that first enterprise client, outside of creating that feedback loop and figuring out all the other things that you're going to need to do in your tech stack to meet that client, is the inspiration that it cascades down to the team.
Yeah.
And allows them to continue to remain inspired, to continue to work those late hours, to continue to move forward, because they want to make that a success, and then they want to expand at least 10 whatever after. So agreed with all that. That's my bit.
So going off of that, and let's talk about positioning and targeting, because we all want that enterprise deal, but how do we get it? So what advice would you give a founder or an early stage team that's looking to start to formulate a plan and a message and a pitch? Where do you start?
I can take a start on this. You don't always have this luxury, but if I take my example of landing BCG as our first enterprise logo, I'd been at BCG and another colleague of mine had been at BCG. So what that allowed us to do was to solve everything for them. I use this very awful analogy, but it sticks with me, so it might stick with you. If you think about a mother bird feeding her chick, she digests all this food, and then she essentially regurgitates it into the baby's mouth. That's what we did with our sales pitch. We're like, this is exactly the value that it's going to create. This is exactly what it's going to look like. These are exactly the stakeholders that you need to sign off, and this is how it's going to integrate with everything. So they literally just needed to be like, yep, that sounds good. Where do I sign? And I wish it was that easy, but I would say when you're looking to get that first enterprise logo, pick an industry that you know extremely well, or someone on your team knows extremely well, because you'll know the pitfalls, you'll know the risks, you'll know the stakeholders. It makes such a big difference. I'd say that's almost the biggest lens independent of maybe potentially where you're going to end up, like really leveraging on your own and your team experience.
Yeah, and I would say, going on with that is, use your network. Oftentimes I think, obviously from a marketing perspective, I love setting up scalable systems and repeatable systems, but when you're just trying to get that first enterprise deal, you connections go so far. Getting in the door gets you so far, and sometimes the relationship connection from somebody that you have, whether it's a direct, somebody you've worked with, somebody you know, or a friend of a friend, like ask for the introductions, just get in the door and leverage your network. Also, I would say, know your customer, do your research. I hate to say use ChatGPT because I feel like that's everybody's advice these days. But if you're just starting out and you just need to kind of brainstorm a little bit, figure out what their objections are going to be from the beginning and really just do your research so that when you're going into those conversations, you're super prepared from a messaging and objection handling, position.
Agree with everything. I think there's two answers to this question. One is that enterprise could mean anything to everybody. Enterprise could be 200-person company. It could be a 20,000 or 200,000 person company, right? So you need to figure out exactly where you think your sweet spot is and what the value prop that you bring to the table that solves their intrinsic problem. And then go after them. You're going after a 200-person company. I would argue that it's probably easier to close that deal with a shorter sales cycle than a 20,000 to a 200,000 person company, right? Less bureaucratic processes and different layers and egos and everything else, right? So you have to figure out what you need from an early startup perspective. If you want to take a year or two to go sell to the biggest company on the planet, or if you want to cut that down to 6 months so that you can prove it out, get that sales cycle, build the FAQs, or whatever you call them, and everything else to build those cycles so that you can bring in somebody else. Because at the beginning, keep in mind, it's founder-led sales for the most part, right? And also it puts you closest to that customer. The second side of the equation here is like, don't go in trying to sell something. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about your features and how long you've been working on this or anything else. Like, they honestly, truthfully, selfishly want to know how you're going to make them look like a rock star and get them a promotion and save them time and help them do their job better. So what you really need to do is spend that time, if you do get in the door, by leveraging your network, by being creative, is try to ask as many questions as possible, in a sense, so that you get to really harness what you then respond back with, exactly hitting their why versus your why. And I think that's hypercritical. And then as you get your first client, let's say they take a chance on you, which they all are. And at that point, the individual that's taking their chance on you, if you're the customer number one or whatever it is, they're putting their reputation on the line. Let's be real. You need to work very closely with them to figure out exactly like what was the trigger, and obviously how can we continue to add value and yada yada. We used to talk about pilots back in the day, and now we talk about design partners. It's a very different thing. But at the end of the day, it's like, really leverage them as a trusted source, and then even ask them for referrals, because if they'll know there are other people too.
So when you say that, it actually kind of makes me think, bringing them into the sales process with you and thinking of it more of as a partnership, is that something that would maybe position you at a better?
I think 100%. I mean, again, it depends on what you're selling and what you're doing and everything else, right? But for the most part, we are still human at the end of the day. People like doing business with people that they enjoy working with, right? And the more that you make it about a win-win-win, the better. And the more that you place the first W as them, and then cascading back, the better. And then you turn them into champions. And oftentimes, also, this comes down to which size company at enterprise you guys are obviously selling to, and how many other layers there are within the organization, where you need to consistently articulate that value up the chain. And more than likely or not, the first person you're going to be talking to anyway has to turn around and play telephone to the rest of the organization and get another call and get another, you know what I mean? And so you really need to be more about being helpful, solving their problem, listening to what's going on, understanding what makes them tick, even understanding what their KPIs are at the end of the year, so that you know how they're being measured, so that when you respond, it's like, okay, check it out. I can help you. You know what I mean? Let's work together. Here's the vibe. You know what I mean? And it's really not rocket science. The problem is that most people roll into these things being like, check this out, I can do this and I can do this, I can solve your problems. And meanwhile, that individual's like, that's not my problem at all, you know? So.
Really good stuff right there, and kind of brings us into our next conversation as far as like sculpting the go-to-market strategy and strategic positioning. And after you get that first client and you win that deal, or at least even maybe if you were almost at the finish line and you lost it,
That's the word.
how do you take those learnings and reposition your go-to-market strategy? Because maybe the first time you go down that path to enterprise, it's not the right path. So how would you give advice as far as when do you adjust your strategy for enterprise based on your current process that you have in place today? You?
Anyone? Yeah, great question. I think Ben's point was awesome that these enterprise deals can take a really long time. So probably start that process before you think you're ready, because you'll have to have 10 conversations before you actually get anywhere. So I think that's a good point. So I'd say start early, start those learnings. I do think you need to be careful in evolving your go-to-market too early, because you need to take on board that customer perspective. But at the end of the day, as a founder, you need to be so convinced in what you're building and what you're doing that you can't be kind of swayed too much. We found that a lot in the early days bringing on enterprise logos. They tend to have a strong perspective, and you need to understand their needs, you need to understand what they want, but you also need to filter that very much to be like, is this the product? Is this the business that we want to build 5-10 years down the line? So I'm just thinking about our experience where we have adapted. I wouldn't say we have adapted. We adapted our sales process too much, to be honest, in the early days. I would say it was more about going multiple rounds. And I think we learned that analogy that I had around, we need to digest everything, because as soon as the customer gets to a point where, I can say with ours that they get to a point and they're like, oh, well, how are we gonna integrate in our world? How are we gonna integrate with the LMS? If you don't have the perfect answer at that point in time, you can lose that progression. Yep. So if you can really put yourself in the customer's shoes, think about all the objections they're going to have. So I'd say that's how we built the go-to-market approach. We just had a much better understanding of what we needed to cover and what their potential objections would be. And it's not even objections in that they're fighting us on price. It was just if we didn't have concrete answers to things that come up in their mind, even just saying, oh, we'll take that back, we'll run a pass with our IT team. And that was a learning we had very much in the early days, is if you can have an IT salesperson with you in those meetings, that's huge.
It's the best thing
your
ever.
CIO or your CTO might not be the best person to be in that meeting. They tend to be very black and white, and that's why they're great at their jobs. But if you can find someone who understands the tech and can give a convincing answer but not overcommit to SOC 2 compliance by signing or something, that was a huge unlock for us. Those are a couple
You just
thoughts.
made me laugh. I mean, my CTO was totally like that. He was mining Bitcoin in the back closet because we weren't paying for electricity. It was great. He was really awkward in a lot of places, but he would always be with me for everything, because obviously I'm a non-technical founder, and these days, obviously, with the democratization of access to coding and everything else, everybody kind of is better than back in my day. But when we would get those technical questions, it was so great to be able to pull up the reinforcements and stuff. But I'll tell you what that kind of brought me in thinking, and this goes into marketing too, is you're having checking the mic 1 2. All right, so you're getting into these conversations, and look, first of all, it's a huge success if you get in the door. We've all been there, right? You're getting your first meeting, you're super excited, right? So you don't want to blow that in general, but what you really want to do is keep that door open by being very consultative and asking for feedback on stuff and everything else, and not necessarily going in for the close, but going in on who else, and asking who else does this potentially impact? Can we set up a meeting with them? Would you mind introducing me to those other individuals, and yada, yada? Because what you're doing is you're essentially creating a team of champions within the organization that are going to support you in going through that. And every single one of those conversations, every single question that they ask you should be going into an FAQ that is then scalable, repeatable, and everything else. Because in the beginning, you're founder-led sales. And you should be, because you are the closest thing to the feedback loop that there ever is possibly going to be. And then you get excited because you're like, we landed the first or second, like, enterprise client or something. I'm going to hire a sales team because they're going to repeat it. And then they show up and they're like, well, where's the CRM? Where are my one pagers? Where's my deck? Where's my yada, yada, yada? You know what I mean? It doesn't exist yet. And so every single conversation you guys are doing, whether or not it's objection handling or it's simply leaning in and asking about a feature or, something, make sure that you're creating that catalog on the back end so that you can eventually scale yourself out into a role and then hire someone who could be effective in that role. At the end of the day, again, it depends. You could look at enterprises selling to institutions, which means it's like bureaucratic and once a year budgeting and yada, yada, or enterprise in selling to Fortune 2000s and up. And, there's different people who have the keys to the budget and different needs. Really just try to get an understanding of that when you're there in the conversation and act as a partner. It's not dissimilar from raising venture capital at the end of the day, right? You don't want to meet an investor for the first time and be like, I'm awesome, cut me a check. You want to meet with that investor and be like, hey man, this is what we're building. Like, do you see the market that we're going after? Like, what thoughts do you have? What are you seeing in the market? Could you see this being applicable to some of your portcos? Like, yada, yada. Okay, great. Do you mind if I keep you updated on what we're up to and everything else? And then blah, blah, blah. And then when you actually go raise your round, you've already built a rapport. You already know what's going on. You've already validated whether or not that individual matches your ICP or not, or they have their same thesis and da-da-da-da. It's really not dissimilar. Selling is selling, right? And selling cures all. And whether or not you're selling to an investor or to an enterprise of big or small, you're not rolling in to do the close until you have 50 or more clients in a repeatable process, or you're doing consultative selling and you're bringing in the vertical experts. In the early stages, you just want that second meeting. And you want to be able to show up from that second meeting with concrete progress from the first, illustrating that you've heard their responses in the first meeting, and here's how you're coming about to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Can I answer from the marketing perspective?
Yeah.
So I'm a super numbers driven person and I agree with everything that they said. When I look at this from a numbers perspective, so I've worked with clients where your funnel, you have a funnel, right? You have to start at the top, because if you're not nailing the top of that funnel, if you're not getting meetings, then the rest of the funnel doesn't matter yet. And so from when I start to think about when do you need to be in a position where you're thinking about changing your go-to-market and you need to adjust something, I look at the numbers to start out with. And yes, when it's the first enterprise deal, there's not a lot of numbers, but you're going to have numbers at the top there and you're going to get some data, and it has to be a constant sort of iteration and looking at the numbers and saying, is this about a benchmark? Like, is this where I should be from the number of, outreaches I'm going for, and then the number of calls I'm actually getting? Am I getting people to that next stage? At what rate am I getting them at? And then after you do that for a little bit, and you have a little bit of volume and you have a little bit of experience with that, you are going to find where the breakdown points are in that funnel, and that's when you have to start addressing them. If they keep popping up consistently over time, you have to address them, right? Otherwise, you're just kind of hitting your head against a wall and not making the progress that you want to get. So numbers-based answer, it's what I do.
I'm going to add one thing, and you're absolutely right, and I wish you were working with me back in the day. But it's also not a bad idea, as you're sort of figuring out who are the target customers and everything else, to, even though you might want these gold tier blue chip, insert metaphor, whatever here, to try to cut your teeth with companies that are in your market, so that you can also try to just be get some face-to-face time. You know what I mean? Everybody's on Zoom these days. Everybody's doing these things these days. Honestly, how many deep relationships have you forged from that? Hopefully a lot. But I think for the most part, if you can be in a space where you can travel to some of these potential meetings and take them out for a cup of coffee, whatever, and have a real humanistic conversation that isn't through, the celebrity squares where you can't even interrupt, you know what I mean? You actually will it'll be a really good use of your time. Really great learnings. You'll probably develop deeper relationships, and then you can leverage any of those learnings to then start expanding through, virtually and stuff like that before you start jumping on planes, But if we are specifically staying on the subject of enterprise sales, which isn't necessarily come to my site, it's product-led growth. It's not, especially in the early days. Like try to make it manageable, so you're not just like flying back and forth everywhere. I'm done.
That's a great point, and I want to kind of circle back around and ask you a question. When, in your experience, as far as the communication between marketing and go-to-market and that whole evolution between messaging and execution, what is your experience as far as relaying that information to marketing so they can collect it and curate it into the evolution of a new market?
Yeah, that's a great question. For context, we didn't have a marketing function when we did our first enterprise deal.
Right.
So that's a short answer to the question. But
It's because you didn't know Bethany.
pardon?
You didn't know Bethany.
No, we didn't know Beth, exactly. And we had no budget for a marketing team. But I would say, I think we're still talking about founder-led sales. Like, for your first enterprise deal, like, I'm a firm believer if either, like, I don't know, first 5 hires who's taking on the commercial hat, or it's the founder. Like, that's where you need to be getting from. I would say that the more important overlay or communication within the business is back to product, is back to IT, to understand what, to compete for an enterprise deal, there are certain boxes that you need to tick. And like, what's your strategy to tick those boxes? What boxes, can you find those boxes, and what's your strategy to tick those? If I look at, it depends where you're at as well. Also, from our context, we were always starting with enterprise. We never went SMB. Like, now we have an SMB function, but we started with enterprise and then we kind of went down. I think if you're starting with SMB and you have an established presence and you maybe Series A, trying to go up, Series B, trying to go up to enterprise, then you probably have a marketing machine that you can enable behind it. But for us, to be honest, it was a couple of people iterating over PowerPoint decks to try and get the messaging right.
Mm-hmm.
Bethany, from your point of view, communication, getting the information, curating it to be able to leverage the data and also the insights. How important is that in your experience?
Yeah, to the point of, is there a marketing function at that stage? So if you've already been going, you have, your company set up, you're already doing small businesses, and you're pivoting to go up market, or you're adding on to go up market, you may have the marketing function to be able to support you. Thank you. I was afraid of the noise.
I've been there, Bethany, so I feel you on that.
Me.
Oh, gosh, I
But
lost my
it's
train of thought.
important.
Yes. So it's important. And so setting up the feedback loop. So I've seen breakdowns in this process where there wasn't a feedback loop. And so typically marketing will set the messaging positioning, or at least the hypothesis for the go-to-market. And then, sales is like the implementer of that. They're the ones actually going out and trying out that messaging and trying out that positioning, and then they're getting real-time feedback. And the breakdown can happen, and it can be detrimental. Like, it can lose you a lot of time if you don't pass that feedback along to both product and your marketing team. Like, full circle loop all the time. You should all be talking to each other, because especially, sales is hearing that there is a specific part of the product that's not serving, the enterprise customer, that there's a functionality missing, or there's just something core that isn't resonating, then product needs to know that. And perhaps it's not a product issue, perhaps it's actually a messaging issue, and how you're positioning it and how you're talking about it, or so it has to be a constant feedback loop, especially in those early days, so that everybody is all on the same page with what you're hearing and what you can do. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to tie up that full loop and make that sale, because you may be missing pieces of it.
I can completely understand that, and kind of brings us to our next topic, which a lot of it is leading up to everything that we've been discussing today, is building trust, creating a good message, delivering the message, finding your network, building bridges, and, crossing them. If we could go over to Ben, I want to say, let's go back, way back, and say, what mistake would you say that you made maybe early on when you're first getting into the industry as far as like positioning and like
Yeah, okay.
evaluating an
Got
enterprise
you.
deal?
I got you. Honestly, I've made countless mistakes. I like to think of it as like failing forward, earning your stripes, figuring shit out. Because if you don't do that, like, it's also boring. I think my biggest mistakes back in the day is like, if for any of you guys out here that know me, like, I am a huge optimist, and I think I can go solve the problems for everyone. And I ended up bifurcating the ICP of my business into 3 places way too soon, which ended up because I got interest from 3 core different places, right? One of them was on the B2C side, right? We were never really a B2C kind of a company, but at the end of the day, we saw huge demand on just the end customer wanting to just use it right away versus like whatever. And I was super stoked. But with that, quick sales cycle, product-led growth, smallest margins, lowest price point, but easy to kind of scale-ish. But we all know that B2C, it's all about marketing. There's huge churn. It's a whole vibe, right? Then it was the enterprise world. It was all the record labels and all the like the large intermediaries. I was super stoked. Of course, I wanted to work there. We ended up selling that company to Universal, so it worked out. But like in the beginning, it was like, oh, they have all these new demands for our development roadmap. They needed permissions and different dashboards and da 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 da. You know what I mean? And of course, I was like, yeah, let's go. And then I'd have to go back to my team, and they were like, super cool, buddy. But the sales cycle was longer. There were more things to basically get signed, and more politics. And then on the other side, the institutions got really excited, which I was also equally stoked about because I saw the value. I'm always about the value, right? And I see the end goal of like, oh man, if we do this, then this is really going to be great for them, and they could do this and da 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 da. But again, now annualized sales cycles, different pricing, different go-to-market, different communication, different storytelling and marketing, and different nurturing and bureaucratic decision-making and all that stuff. I think, and again, that was taxing for my team, because I had to go back and same team. It's not like you have 3 divisions all of a sudden overnight because you have 3 different types of customers. It's the same team, and that was a little taxing. I think if I could do it again, I would maybe try to like double down a little bit more in one area and then potentially expand. But I say that, I don't know if I would actually do it because you learn in all these ways.
learn.
And I will say that now, the way that the tech stacks are now and the way that we have access to certain things, those kind of pivots and those kind of like platform level changes might actually not be a big deal. Whereas back then it was like, we really had to code it, Ahref, and you remember that, anyway. So I think that was a big mistake. Outside of that, like I stand behind most things that I did because I was always leading from the front with a fixed bayonet, and if and building that trust like you touched on earlier, right? And when dealing with some of these sales or whatever, they knew that like I would go down with the ship. I wouldn't hide behind somebody else. And I feel confident about that. I think it was just some of those decisions of me saying yes too often and then kind of being like, yes, I'll figure it out on the back end. I still truthfully do that a lot. Yeah, that's all I got for now. I'll probably simmer on this afterwards and be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this, that, and the other. But I think
Well, I want to
that's
get
the big one.
Hugh's opinion because
Yeah.
your experience might be a little bit different than Ben's.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a good question. This wasn't one we prepared for. That's why
No, it's off the cuff.
we're thinking about it a lot. And it's to Ben's point, it's like, was it a mistake? Would I do it again? I do think I would change. I would actually qualify out my enterprise processes more rigorously than we did. Like, I know there are a couple of people, I think, looking back, I spent a lot of time with them. I traveled to them. I spent a huge amount of time, and like they just, if I look back, they weren't the people that were going to take the bet. They're too secure in their job. They've been there 15 years. Maybe they're 2 years from retirement. Like, they were just too comfortable where they were at, and they weren't going to take a bet on us. So I think that I would take a more rigorous lens. Take every enterprise meeting you can get, take that first meeting. Like, don't qualify those out. But after 4 or 5 meetings, you need to moderate your efforts. And maybe it's someone that you say, fantastic, love meeting with you. I'll keep you updated in Q4. And that's great. And you send an email in Q4 and you keep them warm, maybe for referrals or for lots of other things, or you can go back and ask them questions. But try get a sense of, is this person actually going to put a signature on a piece of paper? Are they going to get the IT teams involved that need to be part of this process? So I would say that qualification can be key.
Agreed. And that it's also not a solved science. You just got to kind of go with what you're authentic with, because I wish I would have done that more, on one end, kind of almost qualify those accounts more, know if I'm going to be kind of dragged on or not. And maybe I'm chasing the logo more than the quality of the revenue that could come in, things like that, But at the same time, and I see this over and over again, like there's something to be said about consistency, and just continuing to show up, and eventually somebody, they're like, oh, you really do care, and yada, yada. And so I don't know, but I think it's important to take all of the information that you're getting here and online and stuff like that, kind of try to distill it down, and then try to go forward with any of this motion as pragmatic as possible and not as emotionally driven as possible.
Yeah.
Again, easier said than done.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know what the audience is like, but if people have sales backgrounds, you're probably good at this already. I think I'm talking from someone who didn't have a sales background. So a simple question of, what would it take to get this deal signed? Like, do that after your 4th or 5th meeting. If they turn white and they can't give you an answer, it's unlikely, and they say that 3 or 4 times, it's unlikely that you're going to actually move the needle. So for me, it's really about that. It's almost that person, because they have to take such a, they have to trust you so much, and they have to make that leap of faith. And if you don't see them, making those moves, getting other people involved, you've got to moderate your time.
And Bethany, even like kind of circling around to you and your perspective, when you have founders or leadership teams coming to you and be like, oh, well, we want to do this marketing and this marketing, this marketing, do you ever have to step in and be like, we keep doing this and throwing a lot of money at it, but we're not getting the results that we want? How do you articulate that message to them? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think looking at the data is the best way to have a universal conversation about something like that, especially where there may be high emotions involved and multiple teams and multiple stakeholders involved. And to that point, I think that, really thinking about that messaging ahead of time and thinking about how you're positioning stuff and who you're positioning it to, because, to their point, you don't want to filter that too much at the beginning, but once you start to realize that if something's not working and it's bringing in unqualified leads for you, then you have to make the switch. And again, the data is going to show you that. You're not going to have the pipeline conversion that you need to have, and you're going to have to go back and say, this is not what the benchmark is that we set. We need to do X, Y, Z, and usually looking at it from a more data-driven perspective allows people to take any emotion out of that or attachment they may have had to a decision or a direction that they gave a while ago, because then it's not about them and it's not about what their opinion was or what they asked you to do. It's what do the hard numbers say, and numbers don't lie.
As unsexy and 2D as they are, they prove to be right most of the time, and it's annoying. But once you kind of get past that, and you can make some really good decisions, then dive full in, because at the end of the day, like, people do buy from passion and belief, and especially in the earlier stages when it's you. You're not sending in typically some chest thumping sales guy, whatever. It's like, it's you. They want to know that you're going to be there, and especially for these larger enterprises, they're putting their reputation on the line. They want to know you're going to be in business in 2 years or 3 years, and that you're going to see it through. And so it's a balance of pragmatic, data-driven approach with, like, the Kool-Aid guy knocking down the wall, and we're here. You know what I'm saying? Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And before we go over to questions, I just want to kind of round this conversation out because marketing plays a huge part of, content, creating content. What are your thoughts around how important are use cases and decks and slides? Like sometimes people can get lost in the sauce of creating a bunch of things that may not land or might need to be evolved over time. So what is your recommendation or advice for an early time sales team or founder when it comes to creating content, case studies, and anything around social proof?
I think it depends on the company and it depends on how much is this a brand new thing for you? Are you new to this industry? Is this a pivot or an additional, like you're going on market, you already have some existing customers and experience and data and, testimonials to be able to say from something, your small businesses or a different product line or whatever. But I think it can, hold on, sorry, one second.
Gesundheit. Okay, that's
Sorry.
that's a really cute
So sorry. It's really about you need to you would need to have some proof behind you, and whether that is data from another part of your business, whether that is your an expert in this field and you've been putting out thought leadership on LinkedIn, on wherever in a white paper, you need to find pieces of trust that you can kind of hang your hat on if you are going for your first enterprise deal and don't necessarily have other prior logos for that and testimonials and use cases from that specific product or company. So don't overcreate, especially when you're at the beginning and you're trying to figure it out, figure out what's resonating, but gather as much sort of proof that people can start to take you seriously and show that you are reliable and you are trustworthy and they're going to take a big bet, especially in enterprise. I think Ben said it earlier, like they're hanging their hat on this to some extent, and like it might be very disruptive to change. They're already using a different, service or provider to you. They have to have a reason to believe that you are the person to make this change, that you are solving that problem for them and that you're going to be reliable and it's going to solve it and they're going to look like a hero. So whatever content needs to be generated to create that, sometimes it's not as much as you think. Sometimes people are creating content to create content and then nobody's looking at it. So start off with what you absolutely need. And sometimes it's a one-pager, that it can be that simple. And if you're finding that you need more as you go, pull more in.
Perfect.
Yeah, big believer in marketing. Ran marketing at Sony. Started an experiential marketing agency that's still in existence today. Like, marketing is storytelling, and sales is storytelling, and it's the most important thing. I think at this early stage, it's all about hearing those nodes and nuggets that help you create the marketing content, and if anything, to share internally or when you get them on the hook. Obviously, I'm at major U.S. bank right now. We have access to all the marketing materials. I don't use like any of it. And when I come to give presentations and talks, like I talk all the time, every week, they're always like, hey, you're gonna bring decks and yada yada. I'm like, no, I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna have a discussion. And then I'll have like leave behinds. Or if my emails, if you guys ever get my emails, I'll hyperlink to certain assets directly in the copy of the email and things like that so that they can go on their own, Easter egg hunt to figure it out. Because sometimes, especially in the early stage, what you are marketing and regurgitating is what you think is the most important thing, and it has nothing to do with what they care about. And specifically in enterprise, and they have budgets that aren't their own, right? Like when you're a startup founder and you're spending money, that's your own money, and it feels very different than when you're a large organization and you're spending a budget that you're allocated to spend. And maybe it's getting towards the end of the year and you have to spend it, or you don't get it the next year, or it's already gone and you have to wait till the next year. There's a lot of these different things, but it's a different emotional purchase. You need to, all they care about is how much additional work is this going to provide for me, and how is this going to make me look better at my job. And you're not going to have marketing materials that necessarily say that, right? If anything, at that early stage, I'd be working with Bethany on my copy and on like my approach, and then the follow-up, sort of architecture and all this stuff, and then listening to those conversations and creating the content that I know answers that person's question. And then you can get more fun with it. But, it's hypercritical.
Love it. Let's just dive into questions. I think we have a lot of talent on the stage, so I want to give you guys time. You're front row, so cheers.
So we talked a lot about data-driven decision-making. How do you balance data-driven marketing with brand initiatives?
What do you mean by brand initiative in this context?
In so far as like, I mean, maybe I've just heard that was a theme throughout the conversation. I know that may not be, it's a bit more tangential to the context of this conversation, potentially, but I think that just was a theme that was brought up often throughout the conversation. There are things that you may not necessarily do as an initiative and pour dollars into that may not have an immediate or obvious ROI on it. So how do you kind of navigate those types of plays in your marketing mix and just your strategy in general?
Thank you, Hassan.
Yeah, I would say investing in, and correct, you guys can have your own opinion, but I'd say investing in brand for your first enterprise logo is a waste of time. You're not going to have enough money to invest in the brand significantly enough to be able to make a dent for an enterprise. Like, they are not buying into a brand, they're buying into the people sitting in that room. So if you do have any marketing dollars, it would be spending it on like core lead gen stuff, getting you in front of the room. That would be my view. It would be like 100% to zero.
Real quick, sorry, I'm inspired by this answer. Back in the day, we obviously didn't, right? We had to figure out a way to make our product inherently social in a sense, right? And drive that network effect in various capacities. And, one of the things that I see early stage founders spend a lot of money on is like tables at conferences and stuff like that. Because, that we've got our booth and, we've got our banners up and we're doing our thing, which I hated because at the end of the day, you're stuck now in a 5x5 square radius and hoping that people come up and give a shit about you, which they don't, right? What's more important is that you spend what little marketing dollars that you do have on kick-ass materials, get in the room, work that room, and drive that pipeline from going to every other table that's there and using that as your lead source, and then expanding from there, right? You're always going to want to build the brand. I'm a big brand guy. Like if I come up with an idea, I do the logo first, which is like case 101, don't do that. But it's like the most fun thing for me, But from there, it's about just like diving in and rolling with it. And then once you do that more and more and more, then you get more data informed decisions. But like there comes a point where you just have to go do it and be smart about it so that you can eventually look at the data and measure it accordingly. There's just different things. Same thing with like outreach, let's say, right? Outreach or Apollo or these outbound sequencing tools and yada, yada, yada. There's so many ways in there where you can kind of A/B test certain emails and different responses and all these things. I don't do that. Like I just focus on doing really real, heartfelt, this is me coming to you, do you like it or not? Versus this is me coming to you this way or this is me coming to you that way. Now I know this is probably like scratching a chalkboard to you right now. But that's just sort of how I do it. And then once there's more shots at goal and all these other things, then you can look at the data and then be like, you know what, Ben's an idiot. We should really do it Bethany's way. You know what I mean? And so at the very beginning, it's really just about getting out and doing it.
And I'll chime in here from a marketing plan and approach perspective is when you're that early and just trying to get your first customer, you need to focus on like the people who are ready to buy and have the problem that you solve and are feeling that problem right now. And that doesn't require, brand people might hate me for saying this, that first customer doesn't require a brand. Like they're not so far in that funnel of consideration, like they're ready to solve the problem. Those are the people that you want to be talking to. And then my typical approach is that you kind of exhaust your ability to get at, from a marketing perspective, all those people that are ready to buy right now or like have that and are actively searching for a solution. That's when you have to start going higher in the marketing funnel and start investing a little bit more in brand. And I'm not saying you shouldn't start out with some semblance of a brand, But I wouldn't be dumping any money into brand initiatives until you've gotten way more than one enterprise client. That's my 2 cents. That being said, I do want to caveat that by saying, if you are going into like sales meetings and stuff and you do need to have some kind of collateral, make it look professional. Don't go in with like a white PowerPoint that has nothing on it, right? But I wouldn't be spending money on branding initiatives at a high level at that point.
No. Big fan of old school business cards. Like, look, I have a bracelet right here that you can like just tap your phone onto, and it like bidirectionally shares our contact information and connects us via email. Super cool. But you know what I do have still in my back pocket is a non-bank approved, Ben designed Staples card. You know what I mean? Like that I always hand out because like you got to have a leave behinds, right? And like the cost difference between whatever this costs and like a half page, double-sided thing that kind of does whatever with a QR code, whatever. Like, look professional, but don't spend the budget on it. I used to hang out at Kinko's. None of you guys probably remember Kinko's, but I used to hang out there between like 12 and 2 in the morning because I used to get my buddy would let me in and I would just print shit for free all day long. Like, you just gotta hustle and figure it out, and then eventually you'll refine what you have that makes sense. Look professional, punch above your weight, but don't spend it on stupid stuff early.
We digressed a
Sorry,
little bit.
you are the
There's a
brand.
co-
Yeah, and that's what we do.
Yeah, we're
You
digressing.
are the brand at this point. You know what I mean? People invest in the founder at this point. A lot of times beyond what the solution is. Okay, I'm done.
You have a question?
Yeah, it actually ties down to what you said. So my question is that I'm not even there yet where I don't even know whom to contact. I don't even know what the very first step would be in terms of like even who to reach out to, who is the decision maker. Like I feel like I'm at that early stage that I don't even know what the first step is. How do I even get the very first meeting? I feel like we talked a lot about like what happens after the meeting, but for me that already feels like such a big milestone. Like how do I even get there? If
right.
it's just me,
I
I'm the
jump in on this?
founder.
Can I jump in on this? All right, I'll be quick. One is
I know you're passionate about
nobody
this.
knows that answer until you're like really getting into it. Truth be told, and it depends on the size of the company and what departments they have and how you want to roll it into that company. Some company sales, you actually try to like secure a small team, and then if it works really well for that team, you try to expand it and fan it out to the company org worldwide, or whatever you want to call it, prestige worldwide.
But how
Or
do I even
you-
like test the theory or the very first like is
So-
this even the right person to contact? Like how do I the very first like the zeroth step?
Well, again, there's no like silver bullet for this answer, right? I would typically start at the top and go down, but depending on the organization, the person that's answering the emails for the top or the calls for the top is not the top, right? So you have to figure that out. Or you can go below and then you realize that they don't have any autonomy over their budgets and stuff. At this point, if you don't know who to go to and you're not 100% sure which like level or whatever, you find someone that you might be second degree connections with on LinkedIn or someone else, and you could ask for an intro, and then you're asking them just questions. Hey, check it out. This is what I'm working on. What are your thoughts on this? Do you know anybody in the organization who you think this might resonate with? And go that way. Don't come at it from the first thing and try to sell. Like how many messages do you guys get today on LinkedIn and stuff like that where it's like, I'm going to solve all your problems. It's like delete,
A lot.
And so just really it's about building just and asking questions and being vulnerable. I find that people want to help if you are coming at them asking for help. Like that's the human nature, and you can use that to your advantage. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it just to get to where you're going. And or ask GPT and be like, here's what I'm doing, whatever. I haven't done it, but in general, we have these tools at our disposal these days. Back in my day, we had the yellow pages.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of marketing and like data ways you could go out and get lists and start, reaching out to them. But honestly, like, just go on LinkedIn today, identify 5 to 10 people, whether it's second degree, first degree, third degree, friends of friends, whoever it is that you think could be at a company that is what you think your ICP could be, and just reach out. engage with some stuff on LinkedIn if they're posting on LinkedIn. Like, be visible to them in a way that is authentic and isn't just trying to make a sale. Like, I love that. It's so true. And just try it. Like, you'll never know until you just try.
And it's literally different for everyone. We had a company in the office today, and it was on
Tut.
paper to be continued. Wait, aren't we the last panel of the day, though?
But someone has a question.
But no,
Thank
Brian
you.
has one.
One more
question over
question.
here.
There's one more
You
question.
mentioned you make a lot of data-driven decisions. What tools do you use to keep track of all of those and like organize your CRM?
Because he's building something that's going to do that.
So it depends. It depends completely on the client's budget. It depends what company am I at, who am I working with. At the absolute most basic, Google Analytics can help you, and it's a free tool, and it has its limitations. Whatever CRM tool you're using can help you with the basics. Oftentimes, you don't even need to spend money on a tool to get the most basic data that you need to just go out and get that first enterprise client. And there are a million different tools out there, but I think Google Analytics and then literally just a report from your CRM to see what the pipeline looks like and what your different segments are looking like if you have leads put in there and then that kind of stuff.
What's your favorite CRM?
That's a tough question. I'm a Salesforce girl. I move, I talk, I'm
that was me. I knew.
Italian, like.
I know. The mics are tough.
Because I'm like, I'm sit here.
So I know we're coming down to the end, and I want to just end with just one bit of advice from each one of them because they have so much knowledge and experience, but this is unscripted too, but on the cuffs, what advice would you give just in general based on the conversation that we had today from your experience and your background? Start with you.
Yeah, for startup founders without sales experience, take salespeople to coffee and ask them about their job, because what you just described is a salesperson's job every single day. And you need to get very comfortable with rejection and reaching out and the number of touch points, and the copy that you write. You just need to get more exposure to the world of sales, I would say, as a starting point.
Ben, do you want to go?
You
Bethany?
go first. I'm still noodling on this.
Oh yeah, okay. Don't be an asshole. Your reputation will carry with you from one thing to another thing to another thing. Let's be real, okay? Like careers are non-linear. So what you're building today might be something completely than what you're building tomorrow or the next year. And everybody that you meet along the way and the people that you're trying to solve problems with and everything else are going to stick with you. And try to enjoy what you're doing. I think that's really important because that also comes across what's going on. And don't be stubborn and not ask for help. Ask for help, but it's not like, please help me with XYZ. It's like exactly what was been said. Like, I'm not great at sales. Well, let me go talk to some salespeople and see what they do, or I'm not great at this. Let me learn. Or leverage your intermediaries, right? Like us at SVB, like 85% of what I do is just helping founders with all of this stuff. It has nothing to do with banking, and ask. There's an area that I made a mistake on. Like I was a thick-headed, fucking Kool-Aid guy, and I wasn't asking for
Beeping these things out.
Any questions? Oh, sure. We're all builders.
And Bethany, your words of advice to close us out.
Okay, to close it out, I would say, again, I'm coming from this from a marketing perspective. I think I liked what Ben said earlier, make it about them. Really, truly understand the pain that they're going through. And if you have been doing this with, you've successfully been doing this with small businesses or something and you're pivoting up market, it's probably going to be a little bit different. So make sure that you really think about that before you start having the conversations and ask about it. But really make it about them, understand their pain, and make sure that you're solving that. And that's what that conversation is. That conversation is gonna get you so far.
People like talking about themselves. Point, and
That was a great.
and they will continue to open up in that capacity if you just ask them. Then you'll figure out the strategy. Yeah.
Well, thank you to the panel. I feel like there was like the makings of a master class, maybe. Maybe you guys can start.
Hey, just put us in, coach.
But anyway, yeah. Thank you to the panel. I'll just keep this really brief now. The startup crawl is assembling on the first floor right now, so if you want a spot on it, I would go cut everybody off at the elevator.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right, cheerio,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Happy building.
Jeremy.
How you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm good. This is
This process decision making.
yeah.